Okay, we're gonna get started. Are we good to go? Okay. First off, thank you so much for coming tonight. I'm Jeff Hauptman. I'm the CEO of Oxford, and I have the pleasure of introducing the team that is going to be bringing you this great development. Sorry, I'm a little casual tonight. I'm coming in hot from Houston. There was a game you guys might have heard about.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Yeah, I just got back. Obviously, I'm a Michigan fan. Basically, been here my whole life. In my house, it was all about yellow and blue. I'm a kid of the public schools. Thurston, Clegg, amazing, thank you. Thurston, Clegg, Huron, and U of M. And I say that because I think it's important to stress the fact that this is a local project. This is brought to you by people that really do care about this town and always have. And after college, I founded Oxford. And so, with that, that's Oxford. It's about 100 people that are overseeing the largest portfolio in town. We're a fully integrated commercial and residential real estate company. Over 2.7 million square feet under management, about a $500 million portfolio. You hopefully see us everywhere, see the Oxford logos in the cars that drive by, on buildings all over the place. We have about 1,000 beds, actually probably closer to 1,200 now. And these are the guys that make it all happen. And with them, and the rest of the team that I'm going to introduce, we're going to talk about why here, why this part of town, why State and Eisenhower. So, most of you know that State and Eisenhower is the main entrance to Ann Arbor. About half of the traffic that comes into Ann Arbor and leaves every night comes through State and Eisenhower. It's about 30,000+ cars in and out every day. And this is an area that, it's not just a gateway, this is the largest retail and office center in the entire county. Most people don't know that. They think of downtown is where it's all at. It's really actually here. It's also, though, what's really nice about this area is it's also a lot less expensive land than downtown. A lot larger pieces of land to work with. So we can do a lot here. And Oxford's heavily invested in this area. So we spend a lot of time thinking about how to make it better. And this is where we're going to start. If you can't quite look out the window now, it's a little dark, but if you look out the window, especially that way, you're going to see about 10 acres of parking lot. It's kind of gross. It's just 10 acres of impervious surface. And we just felt there had to be a better way, and fortunately, over a long period of time, planning came up with a better way. They said, hey, what about this TC1 zoning? Transit corridor, high density, almost like a downtown, right? So that allows us to do a lot more placemaking, creating affordable housing, making a much more sustainable community. So we understand the importance of remaking this gateway into a neighborhood that becomes not just something special to the local community, but something special to the whole region. And we plan to add, ultimately, over 1,000 residential units in the area. Mixed, affordable, and market rate. But here's the thing. We had to find someone to help us do it, right? I mean, Oxford does leasing and management, construction. We do a lot of things, but we don't do ground-up development. We need someone to help us, someone who shared our vision. So we envision a big mixed-use development, but all the developers we talked to, and this is over a 2-year period of time, they're like, oh yeah, we'll build a big tower, and don't worry about everything else around it. It's like, wait a minute, I want to worry about everything else around it. I want to create something where people can walk to it. I don't want to have just, office book, and then like stick something in the middle, and it's all by itself. How do you integrate it all? And just by chance, by luck, after this 2-year search, we came across the guys from Crawford Point. And you can see some of the developments over here. And it's really Bridge Park, and you'll hear more about this in a moment, that for me it was just light bulb went off. This is it. This is what we want to do. This is what Ann Arbor needs. Something like that. Ground floor retail, residential and office above. A walkable community, a place where people don't have to go in their car every time they need to go somewhere, every time they need something. It's so much healthier and so much more sustainable. Get people out of the cars, right? So, with that, I'm going to introduce Russ Hunter, the design genius behind all this. Russ, if you would, please. And I will hand this over to you.
Sure. Can I use this guy?
Oh yeah, I'm going to hand it to you quicker. You have to be two-fisted.
That's fine.
Good.
Is that right? All right.
Hey everybody, so my name is Russell Hunter and I am Executive Vice President of Development for Arbor South. Actually an architect and planner by trade, which I think says something about our company and our team, that there are actually 3 architects on our leadership team. We are first and foremost looking to create community, to do something a little bit different. Bridge Park, here we go. So this is Bridge Park. This is by far our largest development, but by no means our only development. So we've got stuff all over Ohio. Please don't hold that against us. But we do work in Cleveland, Dayton, Cincinnati, soon to be Hamilton. So we're sort of all over the state. But Bridge Park is by far our biggest, and it's certainly the one that we are very, very proud of. And so much came together to create this place. This was a public-private partnership in the truest sense of the word. It took leadership from the city and something actually very similar to the TC1 zoning, a complete rezone of their city that allowed for this sort of dense urban infill to be created. And we learned so much through this process. One of the things that I like to say, I just think it's so true, it's not about the buildings, it's about the space between them. That's what makes a place. It's what makes a place that everyone wants to go back to, that everyone wants to live at, that everyone wants to work at. And so we've really studied what are those things that are successful in placemaking. And we used Bridge Park really as a laboratory. So a couple of things here. So on the left there, Fest. So we're blessed in Dublin, Ohio, with the Memorial Tournament, one of the PGA tournaments. And it's just down the road from us, the golf course that's at. And so we've partnered with them to create all sorts of events that celebrate that tour, and that is one of them. So we literally designed the thing so that we could shut all the streets down. And I forget what the exact numbers are, but it's in thousands of people that will come on a Friday and a Saturday night. It's a music festival. It's fantastic. And quite frankly, for all of us that were around as we were designing Bridge Park, to be able to be at an event like that and look out and see it is kind of a pinch me moment, right? Because we had the vision. To see it come to life has been incredible. Dublin Market is another. You can kind of see this is our main street on the right there, going through Bridge Park. That has grown from 20 vendors to over 120 vendors. Within 6 years, became the largest farmers market in the Columbus metropolitan area. And it really, it kind of all came down to making sure that we were designing for these sorts of things up front, but then also staffing them appropriately. I think it's really interesting. You look at our organization, and we have a marketing and events group that I swear is bigger than our development group. And it's a testament to making sure that we're paying attention to the kinds of things like this that make a community possible, that really, it's that, we're going to go back to placemaking. Similarly, as I kind of alluded to, you got to plan it right. And so, like I said, you can design pretty buildings, and we want to make sure that we're doing that, but the magic is in how you design the spaces between them. So it's making sure on the left there, like high quality public realm materials There is pavers in the intersection. There's granite curbs on the core streets. Really, really a careful attention to detail about the amount of space between the curb and the building, so that it feels right when you want to put on-street dining, you know, when your tenants want to have people out there that are dining, but also feels right when it's cold out and no one is out there, that you've still got that street wall, sort of the building-to-building face that just feels good. It's that Main Street experience when you're walking down the road. Pocket parks throughout. This is another thing that I think makes this development in particular, and it's something that we're really wanting to make sure that we bring to Ann Arbor and to Arbor South, is lots of varied and different pocket parks throughout that take advantage of the ground floor tenants, so those restaurants that want to be able to offer lots of different experiences, whether they be entertainment tenants, restaurant tenants, but also can be used for different events, right? Because we've got that big marketing group. So you come to Bridge Park virtually any weekend during the summer, and usually Tuesdays and Thursday nights during the summer, and there are musicians out there, and there are art galleries that will pop up. It's those kinds of things that make it a neighborhood, that make it successful. It's not just how we design the units. That's important too, but this is what's really important. So we're really excited to be able to partner with Midwestern Consulting and with LAS, so our civil and site engineering firm, and then our architecture and planning firm, to take all of these ideas and make it real here in Ann Arbor. So with that, I want to introduce Ben. He's with LAS. He's going to take you through a little bit more of the vision specific for this site.
Oh, I thought it was you first.
I'm sorry.
So it's you. Let's advance it. Is it not working? That's you. All right, so let me introduce you to Tom.
Thank you, Russell. My name is Tom Colbert. I'm with Midwestern Consulting. As it was mentioned, we're part of the site team for this project. This image here is a contextual map, aerial photo of the site and our surrounding area. It's located, as you can see here, at the northeast corner of South State Street and Eisenhower Parkway. You will note that South State Street is a major corridor into the city of Ann Arbor from I-94. You'll note a couple of other landmarks here in Briarwood Mall and I-94. You also know this area to be an area that has a number of office buildings, commercial retail, and hotels. When we look at a project in the city of Ann Arbor for development, we have a number of guidance documents that are available to us. One of those being the comprehensive plan. That comprehensive plan has a number of elements in it. These elements are used to help describe and give a flavor for what development would be in the city. One of these elements is the sustainability framework element. It has guidance with regard to climate and energy, community, land use, and resource management. And as we get into the vision of the project, you'll see how these are incorporated into the design. Another element of the comprehensive plan is the master plan land use element. This land use element was created, I think, in 2009, and the city's currently working through a process to update this. But in this element, you'll see here that the site is largely classified for office with a little tiny red square at the corner of South State and Eisenhower. That is the retail and commercial gas station. If the comprehensive plan is the guidebook to land development and what is seen by the city to guide development, the zoning ordinance is are the rules. This is an excerpt of the zoning map for the city. You'll notice that the site is zoned TC1, as Jeff has mentioned. The zoning ordinance has a set of rules that are utilized here. This is an excerpt from the schedule regulations of the area and bulk placement. It'll describe things like floor area ratios that are permissible, setbacks, height, and lot dimensions that are minimally needed for development in the TC1 district. Our team has had our land surveyors, our arborists, and others out to the site to evaluate it. This is an image here of the existing conditions map that was developed that was used to also help guide the project. We're sitting here in the iconic 777 building. We're next to the 789 building to the east, just off of Eisenhower Parkway. There's a gas station at the corner of the two roads. We have the parking structure that's shaded in gray. The surface parking that Jeff mentioned to the west of that. There's utilities and easements that crisscross the site for water, sanitary, power, gas, telecommunications, and so on. And there's a couple of stormwater management basins or ponds that you might see if you drive by the site. There's a small pond near the corner of South State and Eisenhower, just north of the gas station. And then there's the pond that you see at the corner of Eisenhower and Boardwalk. The interesting thing that doesn't show on this map, and you might not have noticed if you were coming to this meeting, is that there's about maybe a little over 30 feet of fall from the northwest corner all the way to the southeast corner. So there's a bit of grade change that is made up throughout the site. You don't notice it so much because the parking structure is built into elevation, and the grade change along South State Street happens kind of to the north there. Let me back up one thing I want to mention. So I mentioned we had our arborists to the site. So there are a number of trees that were planted with the development of the 777 project many years ago that have grown to landmark status. There might be a few of them you would see in the landscape islands and so on. Those will be impacted, or some of those will be impacted, but we do anticipate that as part of this project that we would be mitigating for those in some of the open space areas that Russell had been speaking about. And with that, I'd like to turn it over to Ben from LAS.
I'll turn this on.
What do we have?
Thanks, Tom. I think Tom just did a great job of kind of setting the table and talking about the background of this site and what it is, the context. It's a pretty large site at 23 acres, and there's a lot to consider when developing a site this size. Starting talking about the design process, I just want to say that Lord Sargent, we were hired to look at the site a couple of years ago as far as master planning. And I think why we were engaged is we're not just architects, we're urban planners and designers and landscape architects. So we really take a close look at the land and how it's utilized first. So it's not just a collection of buildings stuck on site. It's really thought out about how you want to circulate, how you access the site, how you move through the site, and especially how pedestrians experience the site. So we'll talk about that a little bit in detail as we move through this presentation. I don't expect you to see all the design here. It's just an example of all the iterations that we've gone through and kind of carefully looked at over the last couple of years with Oxford and team, just trying to assess what to do with the property and how to do that.
Sure. Hey everybody, I'm Matt Sherry. I'm a landscape architect, and so Ben and I have been working together for a long time. And when Russell initially said the thing he just said 10 minutes ago, that the spaces between the buildings are as important, if not more important, than the buildings themselves, nobody ever says that. So it makes us really excited to really drill down and think hard about what makes these places special. I just wanted to talk quickly about the site. Tom mentioned kind
kind of orienting you to the site. But this, the yellow line is kind of the redevelopment area, so to speak. It's about 18 acres plus or minus. And so one of the biggest things, would you mind if I have that real quick? So I'm going to skip real quick if that's okay. So when we started this, the biggest thing that's fundamental to the whole thing is the super block. So where we are right now is a super block. It's about 1,000 to 1,200 feet long in terms of a block. I show this because on the left, that's downtown Ann Arbor and our site compared to scale. So the thing that's great about Bridge Park and downtown Ann Arbor and some of these other places is the scale of it. A really good block size in a downtown area like that tends to be somewhere in the 300 to 400 foot range. The ones in downtown Ann Arbor are pretty regular. It's about 330, 340 feet square. So our biggest charge was, how do we break down the super block to a human scale to create a place that people want to be? So that was kind of fundamental.
And to provide more than one use, like just one single use.
Exactly, diversifying the land uses. So I just wanted to, and so this is the site, and if there is a grid, there's sort of this, we're in this building right here, right? So this is sort of the main street. I think we're calling it Main Street. For lack of a better street name. So this is kind of the grid, and so the biggest thing was to break that down and figure out how do we create a place with that as the sort of foundational bones of the grid. And so what you see is we take the grid that's there and extend the northern street to State Street, and then insert some new north-south streets, reconnecting it and creating this, the sort of framework of what will be the place. And some of the other things, and as Russell said, public spaces and spaces between buildings are very important. We kind of, and you'll see in some of the renderings and the site plan, this idea of a public space that anybody and everybody can sort of be in is sort of the meeting part of the place. And then red, generally, where we're thinking like active use and retail along the building. That's just, it's diagrammatic at this point, but that's kind of the bones of it. So you take that framework and that translates directly into this, which Ben is going to speak to. This is our conceptual master plan.
Cool. Yeah, so this is a conceptual master plan, and what it consists of is 7 multifamily buildings, 3 parking garages. There's going to be street parking along the streets, and all the streets are going to be wider and have a tree line and more pedestrian friendly. But the beating heart, as Matt mentioned, is the centerpiece of this site, and it could be closed down for events, have lots of activities going on, and there's going to be a park. All these buildings are multi-uses, so residential over commercial, retail, restaurants, shops, that sort of thing. And then there's a few, you'll notice 3 smaller buildings on the plaza. We're thinking there'll be smaller commercial, like a restaurant or a cafe, picture cafe on the lawn type thing. I'm trying to keep the parking on the periphery of the development, the parking garages, so that you can get out of your car and start walking around and move about the site in more pedestrian fashion. The residential units will all have their own private amenities. They'll have courtyards that they can utilize privately and separate from the community. But then there's also the community part. So it's intermingling throughout the site. And then there's a hotel component on the southwest corner of State and Eisenhower.
The other thing that whenever you're creating sort of a new community or expanding an existing community, one of the things that we always try to find is what are the assets that are there to build on. And so one of the things that we've kind of been intrigued with. We haven't really done a lot of design work around it, but there are the two ponds, one down here, which is just over there, and then one to the north. You know, stormwater and rainwater means different things to people than it did 30, 40 years ago when these were built. And so we think that there's a lot of opportunity to amenitize those, create pocket parks and dog runs and playgrounds and walkways around them that don't exist now for marginal investment. We think that also sort of bolsters the brand of the place and makes it a more leasable and desirable place to be. This, for example, this block here, you'll see this, we call this the Paseo. I think that's what we still call it. But it kind of connects to the what could be a little park up there. And so there's a lot of these like moves in the sort of woven into the site plan that relate to some of the things that are there.
This looks at the program in 3D, and so just kind of it's illustrating a little bit better that the darker shade of orange, red-ish is the commercial level, and everything above it will be residential. So that you can see how it creates an urban feel, but it's very, it's a good scale for this kind of environment. And so we started looking at the character of the architecture. We still have a lot of development that we're working on as far as that goes, but what we want to do is create a unique environment here. Everything kind of works together, and we're still working on the actual architecture, but you can kind of see how you see some vegetation throughout. You see the parkland, you see the ground level, the surface, the main street feel, which is very different from this part of town. So it's creating a new environment similar to what Rush showed on Rush Park. There'll be hangouts zones and pedestrian-friendly, park areas, the main central plaza.
Sure. And I don't want to repeat what Russell said, but yeah, I think the placemaking is really important, and we're really excited about that. This is sort of an aerial view that sort of it's one of 1,000 different versions of this space, which we think is kind of the meaty part of the development. So some people call these jewel box retail. They're sort of small, sort of kiosk-y retail, sort of floating in this really vibrant public space. But one thing about these types of places is we want cars to go very, very, very slow. And if you can imagine, this whole thing doesn't even have a curb. This whole thing could be one space, and you can still drive through it 98% of the time, but you can certainly close it off, and it could be an event. Lots of symbiosis between the ground floor retail and the space itself. Yeah, this kind of takes you down into it, just a sketch, and again, one of 1,000 versions of this. We haven't really designed it, we're just kind of sort of throwing out ideas. We want to hear from you if you have ideas for this. It's also important that just because you design it in a way that is cool and feels cool, it doesn't mean that people will come. You have to activate it, and the retail is what activates it, and that's what this space related to the active use in the ground floor retail is what will make it really cool and feel like a place that you really want to be. That's some examples of some other similar public spaces. Some people call this a curbless street. I think in Germany they call it a Wunderf. If you want to Google it, it's pretty interesting. Some examples of some similar spaces just that we're kind of inspired by. And then if you could going so that the sort of more public spaces are sort of also complemented by some pseudo-private and fully private spaces, such as pool decks, for either the for sale product or for the for rent product, or sometimes a mix of it.
And then this is just a few examples of some interior amenities that we've done on similar projects. And so every space is going to have its own kind of identity. So the internal amenities will be filled with vibrant designs, hopefully local artwork throughout the spaces. We also like to provide amenities such as indoor covered bike parking, which is a big deal, especially here in Ann Arbor. And so we'll be thinking about a lot of different ideas like that throughout this development. Jumping back to town.
Yep, so the site team gets to follow the architecture team and the landscape team. I think they started with wanting to talk with you about all the places that you want to see and all the cool things and the structures and the buildings. So I guess I'm talking about all the things you don't want to see, maybe? I don't know. But utilities for the project. The project, as you've seen through the design, has a number of blocks, urban blocks in nature. The existing utilities in South State Street, Eisenhower, and Boardwalk will remain. We plan to connect to those. There's also some utilities, water that kind of goes down that main street that will remain, that we'll connect to. And then we're going to build water loops around our blocks. And what those loops do is they set us up for servicing the buildings and then also providing for fire protection, hydrants, and those kinds of things. So we'll have a number of water loops that get built with the project. Sanitary sewer currently enters the site, goes down South State Street along north side of Eisenhower Parkway. Then it comes into the site serving this building and 789 building. And then it comes up towards the parking structure. There's a little lift station. We're planning to remove that lift station. As part of our project, we're going to service the buildings as they front on the sewer in South State Street and Eisenhower, where it's convenient there. And then we're going to create a lift station that would be on the north side of the site. Lift stations aren't something that you really physically see. They're underground. We would bring our sanitary sewer from some of the buildings to that lift station and then bring the sanitary to Boardwalk. Actually, go back. Forgot something. Franchise utilities, gas, electric, telecom, those kinds of things. They do exist at the site. They exist around the site, and they will make a great network for our project to connect to. There are some utilities that crisscross through the site that will be relocated as part of the project. And our interior access drives are going to serve very similar to what a standard roadway would do, where you'd have your vehicle, pedestrian traffic, and then underneath we would have our sanitary, water, and franchise utilities that would service the buildings. Stormwater. We are contemplating with this concept that we would be solving stormwater with an underground solution in 4 areas that are highlighted in orange. Those 4 areas correspond to parking structures or parking areas. They will be collecting water in each of the blocks, if you will, through inlets, catch basins, and so on. That will be draining to those underground stormwater basins. We've been working with the county and the city, having discussions about doing some things for infiltration testing and so on, so that our stormwater management system meets or exceeds the city and county requirements for such things. We're going to treat the quality within the system, and then we're also going to be treating the quantity. So as we build out this site, the current site is undersupply from a stormwater quantity perspective with what's been built in the past. It was with previous rules. With the new rules and integrating these new underground detention basins, we will be bringing the whole site back into compliance with the regulations. So each of these blocks gets their underground basin, and then 789 and 777 building get to utilize the existing stormwater solution that happens at the corner of Boardwalk and Eisenhower, the pond that they're going to energize with walking paths and those type of landscape opportunities. Closing.
All right.
Okay, so that was a lot. And obviously we've got some Q&A here, but there's just a couple of things that I wanted to point out before we get to Q&A. Process, so this is step one. There's an awful lot of steps yet to come. We are aiming, this kind of goes into timing as well, so we're hoping that summertime this year that we will have plan approval, site plan approval for what you see here. That would mean that we could have buildings coming online mid-2026. This will certainly not be, so, let me back up. It's not our intention in any stretch to think that the only time that we will ever see people again is at an architectural review or a planning and zoning commission. So it's not the way we operate, and quite frankly, another thing we do a little bit differently. Well, a lot of other developers will tend to send their zoning attorneys to these things. It's me. I'm the one that's up there talking to everybody. And so we try to stay as connected as we can. So there will be plenty of opportunity between now and then to continue to understand what the community wants, because at the end of the day, if you don't want what we're building, why are we building it? So, I wanted to put that out there. Do I know exactly what it's going to look like yet? What that sort of process is going to be? I don't, but I promise you that we'll know more as we get a little bit further on. I think beyond that, we're really ready for Q&A. Is there anything else you want to add?
No, I think we're ready to go. We have a mic right here. You're welcome to just speak very loudly. Certainly works in the smallest place.
Oh, we've got another one, right?
We have another one?
Spare mic over here.
To say, I think can you guys hear me back there okay? Got them. All right, questions?
Just a question on height.
Height.
We didn't talk about height. What are your thoughts?
The height of the buildings will be, there'll be 5 stories of residential or 1 story commercial, so 6 stories, no more than 75 feet. So the building that we're in right now is 10 stories. So none of the buildings will be as tall or taller than this building.
Don't, just to qualify, don't hold us to that exact, right? There may turn out that one building may make more sense to go another story up. But it will all be within the TC1 zoning. Yes, we will all be, looking for a variance.
There's some opportunity at the State and Eisenhower corner where that building that would fit clearly within the regulations. Could get a story or 2 taller, but we just don't have it done yet.
Another question.
I'll do a follow-up. I went through this out west with the development, and one of the questions came up, and that is light. In other words, buildings, different degrees, creation of open light in the corridors. So it doesn't feel very closed off. And what I'm hearing from you is you're trying to keep this development, like Main Street, broader. So you don't get something, give the example would be, right now you go down Main Street, and there are a couple of developments built right on the curb, and it feels like you're going through a canyon, and then you pop out. So it doesn't have a very good open feel, and I just wondered if you could address that just a little bit. What you expecting?
Well, as we kind of mentioned throughout the presentation, we really want this to be a pedestrian-friendly environment, and you can't do that when it's really tight. So the spaces between the buildings are going to be wider wider sidewalks. You're going to have a row of trees on each side of the street, at least that's what we're planning so far, with a parallel parking spot. So that makes it pretty wide. And daylight is very important to all of us. So that will be considered in all these developments. And you know, you've seen in some of the pictures that there's courtyards in every one of these. That's also to promote more daylight within the residential units.
Yeah. Please.
So you mentioned 2026 having some buildings online. When do you expect that to be out here turning dirt?
I think it is entirely possible that we will be out here turning dirt at the end of this year. Now, obviously, that's notwithstanding the process going through, but there's definitely a world in which that can happen. Yeah.
Back
Yeah.
here?
Are you planning for EV charging?
Absolutely. Yes.
Required by code, too. Who else? Please.
Is this all my right?
Stay within TC1.
And what, are you using gas heating? Someone's gonna ask eventually.
So, the gas heating, we talked about that. The residential units will be all electric. That's the plan so far. So the restaurants, it's a little more difficult to not use gas for restaurants, but right now we intend all the residential units to be electric.
Cool, thanks.
Anybody else?
Yeah, I compliment you on the overall urban design. I think that the grid framework and just the way you're programming the space is really exciting. And as a neighborhood resident here, I'm really, looking forward to that. There's definitely a higher and better use for this corner than just what's happening. Sort of my question for you is coincidentally, just about a week ago, I was reading in the paper 24 developments to look for in the city of Ann Arbor over the next couple of years. And the question I asked myself is, and all of them are really exciting, and I support them. And I asked myself, and I didn't count the number, and I meant to, is how many units are coming online. I was trying to phase it out within the X number of years. And just, I question that the demand is going to be there for the supply of both hotel units and residential units that are coming on board.
Sure.
And I'm sure you're thinking that through because it's your money, not mine.
Sure. So right now, we did a hotel study, and in this neighborhood, the study came back, we hired a national firm. The demand for an upper upscale, so like an AC Marriott type of hotel, is extremely high. Very hard to get a block of rooms right now. On the residential side, I think is everyone here that's lives in the area is familiar. If it's affordable, it's going to get leased. And there is going to be a 60% AMI component to this project. On the market rate, first off, Oxford has, as you know, a significant presence in residential, and we're running at 100% occupancy, Katie? And the market as a whole is running at about 98% occupancy. And what really drives that is something that no one can sway. It's the university. And their growth plans right now, as anyone who's read the news, are fantastic if you like to see it grow. It's a little scary if you don't, because they are going to be spending billions over the next, I think it's up to 2050. So the next 27 years, they plan on doing massive expansion. It's not just their dorms. They're talking about building a tram that goes from Central Campus to North Campus. They are making serious investments in this town, and all the while that is driving jobs and driving people that want to live here. Hopefully that aren't going to drive here to live. We want them to live here, because getting those people off the road of those long commutes is a lot of what this is about. Does that kind of answer your question? There's more data, but don't get me started. Well, what else can we answer for you?
You've already acquired all this property?
We have, yes. Our partners now control all of the parking lot, the office building. It's an old house, but it's an office building there, and the gas station. So the whole thing is under control.
How do you guys plan for mitigation of disruption disruption to existing tenants in both of the buildings here?
So that's a great question. So one of the things that has really driven quite a lot of the site planning to date is exactly what that. So we've got a lot of parking here for a lot of existing tenants. This is like over 500,000 square feet, I think, between the two buildings. So, and we have to plan this thing so that as we phase the construction, at no time do we take off parking spaces more than what they need. And so that plan, these guys can attest to it, has just been like meticulously figured out as to exactly where those parking structures are, so that as we phase this thing, and it's basically from west to east, as we go, we bring parking lots online, so we bring the first two structures online before we take that one structure that Tom was talking about earlier, that existing two-story one. We can't touch that until the first two structures are complete. And so that has been top of mind for us for a really long time.
And then, in addition to that, so part of it also is, as you said, so much of traffic comes in through this intersection. I mean, I know I work in these buildings, so when you try to get out, I'm leaving, you know, you have people in Maverick, I need to get out 5 minutes earlier because that's going to make a big difference. So, you know, it's one of those things where the existing employees right now do work and don't live in this area because there's no place to live.
If you talk about once it's done, what's going to be like?
Yeah.
So that,
you know, because
it's a big part of what we're thinking
you don't
about.
want to drive people to like the bottleneck and then they keep it up. It's just a bad experience.
Keep this part in mind as you think about that question. If everyone just left at the same time, you're right. We'd have that problem today, right?
Right. Yeah, exactly.
Part of what we're trying to do is create a place where people don't want to just leave. Part of what we're trying to do is make it so that people will actually live here, walk across the street to go to work. People that actually work here are going to say, I'm not just going to get in my car and drive to a restaurant. I'm going to walk across the street to go to the 8 different restaurant choices that I have right now. So part of this is disrupting those traffic patterns so that you don't have to have everybody arrive at 9 and leave at 5. We want to create an environment where people are coming and going. This place becomes alive, right? Much more a 24/7 kind of environment, like our downtown. If you wanted to design the downtown from scratch today, but you want all those wonderful elements that are there right now, this is what we're trying to do here.
And as part of this business development, so I've heard about restaurants and storefronts and things like that. What about the other amenities that families need, like childcare or anything like that, or these spaces? I mean, obviously you can't force somebody to, you know, just, hey, I'm going to found a child care center or something. But would these spaces be amenable if somebody wanted that business model or wanted, you know, kind of incorporate more of those lifestyles?
Love that.
Yeah, we put a lot of thought into sort of the shapes and the sizes of these buildings for maximum flexibility, right? Because standing here today, we don't know exactly who the ultimate tenant is going to be. And we learned this lesson actually in the development of Bridge Park, that there's a difference between what a retailer or a child care provider can pay in rent to what a restaurant can pay in rent. And if you don't get that right up front, then guess what? Your retailers and your child care providers, you've kind of automatically left them out. So we have to be thinking about those things, and we are.
Right, because people aren't going to linger if I have to get my shit up because it's got to happen, or, you know, I need to get out quickly because of this strong.
Absolutely.
Oh, and the one other thing I will say, because I just think this is kind of testament to everything you said. So I have a team of about 6 project managers. 2 out of the 6 live at Bridge Park. So a third of my team just walks across the street and goes to work, which is pretty astonishing, you know, when you think in a city the size of Columbus, Ohio, that literally a third of my team lives and works in the same place.
Do we have a question over there?
Yeah, so my question is about accessibility on the other side of it. So we've got existing communities around on the south side. What is the accessibility to inviting them to come into this community, which seems pretty self-contained? What is that going to look like?
I'm sorry. In terms of inviting the people that are already living in the area to come here?
Right. Because we're going to, you know, you would think that they would want access to some of the amenities that are within this community as well. So, you know, are they going to, what is the, is it going to be accessible to them?
So our goal is to make this, we talk about placemaking. Our goal is to make this a place where people want to come, whether you walk from the neighborhoods right over the bridge, whether you're biking, or if you happen to still be driving. Our goal is to make it really easy to get to. And so the idea is you don't have to go downtown to get something to eat, because it just fact. This is kind of a food desert around here, right? There's not a lot of choices. We want to create a place where people will take their families and come down here. And there's certain things, the tenants we're talking to, we can't announce just yet, but the kind of tenancy that families are going to want to come here to spend an evening hanging out, having fun. It's not just about the residents that are here, although they're going to love being here. Their life's going to be a lot easier because they don't have to necessarily get in a car to go do things. But also help make it so that people can come here and do something, not have to feel like the only place to go is downtown.
And I think to add on to that, we talked about the pocket parks, a lot of those open spaces, there's the space between the buildings, right? All of that is open to the public. So that is not, there might be a handful of spaces, you're talking about the courtyards in the middle that might be for our tenants, you kind of think of it as like front yard, backyard, but a majority of the green space that you saw on that plan is all front yard. It's open to everybody. That's the places where the farmers market and the music festivals and the tailgating festivals, those are the places where those things happen. And quite frankly, they're way more fun when everybody else shows up too. And so that I think is the lesson that we learned when I talked about my marketing and events team being as big as my development team, is because if we're not bringing everybody else in, we've only got half the picture. So I appreciate what you're saying. It's important, right? And I think we've got to do the work to make sure that those spaces that we create feel as much like they belong to the people that live here as to the people that live around here. This is a community.
What else? Who else?
Sorry.
Start there, go back.
Yep.
Is there going to be covered bike parking in the parks and garages, do you think? Like, do you have protection from...
Yeah, that is the plan. There would be covered parking likely in the parking garages, but we've done it inside the apartment buildings for residents as well, so it should be both in this development. Thanks.
Yeah, there's a fair amount of empty or underutilized retail space in recent building in the city. Would you be able to characterize your strategy for ensuring that you're able to populate the retail places that you describe and that you say are really central to the success of this? Because I think you could anticipate that if that doesn't work as well as you anticipate, you could end up with a project that goes sideways, at least doesn't align with the visions we have now. So could you characterize how you're going to get, and what sort of retail would you want to get in there?
Just to speak to the market, Oxford is the largest manager of downtown retail storefronts. So I don't know if you're talking about downtown or suburbia, but we're actually at 100% in retail occupancy. There's certainly there's spaces that come and go and there's transition, but what we've been finding is the retail market has been extremely strong for good retailers. You're always going to see tenants transferring from people retire, people's businesses go sideways, but in general, Ann Arbor's retail has really bounced back strong. And I think if you give it another couple of years and keep watching, you're going to see that pretty much not many storefronts that are vacant at all. But with that said, you want to keep going?
Yeah, absolutely. So I said earlier that we don't know exactly, we try to be flexible because we don't know exactly who's going in those spaces yet. We have some ideas. And so there's actually a meeting, I think it's a week from today, where folks from our commercial leasing team are coming out to meet with their commercial leasing team to start to really strategize around that. There's a critical mass that's really, really important early on in a project like this. And it's a reason why, to some people might look at, you think about the first phase of what we want to accomplish here, they would look at that and think, why are you building so much so fast? Well, we're doing it because we need to create the place. And it's about the buildings and it's about the places in between the buildings, but it's also a little bit about the ground floor activation. And so we've got to have a strategy for that, and that's happening as we speak. And it's kind of one of the beauties, I think, of our partnership, quite frankly, is that you guys know this market better than anybody. You're going to be able to bring a lot of local flavor to this. We know a few people too that are unique to this market that we think can be additive, that we think will be really, really exciting additions to the Ann Arbor community that we want to bring with us as well. And so the idea would be is that, as soon as we're coming out of the ground on this thing, we've got a much better idea of who's ultimately going to be on those ground floor tenants. So more to come on that, but hopefully that answers your question.
You have a question there?
I just wondered what the coordination would be between your project and Briarwood as it's changing. You might have addressed that.
That's Simon and Hines. So Briarwood's owned by Simon, and they're doing the Dick's Sporting Goods in the I think it's a Harvest Market grocery store, and then Hines is partnering with them to do about 350 units of housing, but completely separate from the word.
And also, I believe, governed by a completely different code.
Correct. They're not under TC1.
Yeah.
You want about the timing overlap between what they're doing and... Yeah. I think that they're planning to have occupancy by late 2026. And our first phases will start to take occupancy at about the same time.
Yeah.
Thanks. I was looking at a map of Bridge Park, and it looked to me that it's described as connecting to the original downtown.
Mm-hmm.
And so I guess I'm curious, I guess the follow-up question on the other person asked about accessibility, where do you see this connecting to other parts of town, or how people are coming in, other than by car?
You're talking about specifically Ann Arbor, not Bridge Park.
What?
You're talking about specifically here.
Well, just when I was looking at the map of Bridge Park, I was like, oh, okay, I can see like you built this community that is, in addition to being having all of these components to make it a pleasant place to be just of itself, it's also got this connector. And it didn't make sense looking at the map how distant that is, how much of a walk it actually is to get from downtown, like the regular downtown to Brush Park. I guess that's my question. Like, I bike this area a lot, and it's not like super pleasant to bike. But first, if there was something here that I wanted to visit, who do you have, like, where do other areas of town and how do they connect to this place, other than the people who simply live here?
Do you want me to take this? Sure. So I think there's still work to be done. I think is the best answer that I can give you there on that.
I think there's also the question of the mall, right?
Yeah,
it's
there absolutely is.
Grocery stores going in the malls, and that's like you've got Eisenhower between.
That is a macro question, right? Because it's about more than us, and so it's the conversations that we need to have with the local folks, the city folks, to say, okay, what are you doing with State Street? What are we doing with Eisenhower? How can we help? There was, at one point, there was a bus stop on State Street that was removed. So there's not currently any bus connectivity on State. Now, there is on Eisenhower. How can we fix that? How can we make biking more accessible to folks? How can we make this place a hub where folks, as we continue to link through like bike paths, where this can be a place where people can stop, right? So it's a hard question just for me to answer without other folks in the room, because otherwise it doesn't feel sincere, because there's only so much we can do. There's only so much we can do within our 17 acres.
Right. I'll throw a couple little things just to add to that in terms of what the future, we don't know right now. It's a great question. We don't know for sure right now what it holds, but we do know that we're setting up a business improvement zone similar to what's around Main Street to bring the owners and tenants of properties around here together Because up until now, this is not really a neighborhood. I joke, this is like getting called the Midwest, the flyover states. This is the drive-through part of town. People don't hang out here unless they have something to have to go to. So we want to create an actual neighborhood out of this area and begin by bringing together all the people that make it a neighborhood and get them to start talking about how do we do better wayfinding? How do we make it more bike accessible? How do we make it a little cleaner and actually get like the medians mowed every now and then, right? How do we make it more welcoming? So that's the biz district that we're working on. And then in the long run, the goal is to do this in more parts of this part of the neighborhood because this whole area is zone TC1 now. So it doesn't have to be just us that's doing this. Other developers are welcome to come in and say, hey, we want to do something and add density and make this a more walkable area. Eventually, you're going to have a lot more people than cars, and our goal in working with the city council is to eventually see potentially a lot more accessibility for bikes and pedestrians along Eisenhower. That's our long-term goal.
And just to add one more thing to that, I think, you have to start somewhere, right? What's interesting about Bridge Park, so the street grid is kind of the way that you start with that, right? If we do our job successfully and if this continues to grow, then at some point you won't know where Arbor South stops and the next thing starts because it all starts to feel natural, right? That should be the ultimate goal. And so then you're able to take all of the principles that we've been talking about and expand them and start to link everything together. But this is the seed for this area.
Who else has a question?
I just have a question about the parking. You're saying you're adding 2,300 total? So what was in the flyer?
Approximately.
Yeah, approximately.
And we're putting 1,200 parkings here?
It's about 1,000 right now.
1,000?
Yeah.
That's right here? 2 office buildings? Is that?
So the beauty of that relationship is that they park really, really well together. Bridge Park, this has been one of the things that has been our experiment. Dublin, when they created their new zoning code, they were, I thought at the time, really liberal in reducing the required parking, realizing that there's a shared component to it, right? That there's some amount of people that are going to work, and so they leave their parking space open and then somebody comes to work. What is proven, and we have the parking counts, like we've literally gone through our garages and click, 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 is that we still overbuilt parking. And so what we were able to do at Bridge Park, and I think is a possibility here because of the way that we're phasing the construction, is to build the first one, do some studies. How did we do? At Bridge Park, what we found out is that our first parking garages we overbuilt, and so our subsequent phases, we reduced the amount of parking that we built. Because no one wants a bunch of giant parking structures at the end of the day. We want more neighborhoods. And so I think that's a real possibility here, but I will say, like, this, we're going to have to study that ad nauseum, right? Because that's something everybody's going to be really, really curious about, and it'll be a part of the reviews for sure within the city zoning review. But it's been incredible to me. I've been surprised at what's happened with parking utilization at these sorts of neighborhoods. Yeah.
Maybe just touch on this and I didn't catch it. Are you able to put parking underneath the residential and multifamily, a couple levels of parking underground?
So the design right now has all of the parking above ground. It has not put it underground. Underground is expensive. I mean, that's kind of an obvious statement, but there's something else that I think parking structures that are completely underground or that are completely lined don't feel very good. They don't feel safe. You can't see the daylight. They're artificially ventilated, and so Bridge Park. I hate to keep bringing it up, but it's so what we've been able to do, kind of through subsequent design of those structures, we've gotten a little better at it with every single block to get to the point where you almost can't tell that they're a parking structure. Keep the ground floors activated, design the facades so they don't look like this sort of regularized concrete box. but rather kind of look like they could be warehouses, as an example. And so, and Jeff, you can attest, you've been there. There are parking structures there that you don't know unless you go really up and you're like, oh, I'll be darned. And so what that does for us is it makes the experience better. But if you design them right, the other thing you can do is you can make them the ability to change them later. So we can design those structures so that the sloping is such that it may be that in the future, as the demand continues to go down, right? If we see that the demand for these parking spaces continues to go down, maybe that space eventually wants to be office space. Maybe it wants to be residential space. And if you design the structure appropriately, you can do that. You can't do that if it's underground.
Question back here? Is there a mic? Is there a mic?
Thank you. So this is going to be a lot of change, which hopefully will be very, very good. There's a lot of things that have to happen, some of which are key, like getting the population density, allowing you to bring in retailers. So the curious question that I have is, what are the 4 or 5 things that absolutely have to go right for this to be a success?
That's a great question.
You want to take a second?
Why don't you start? I feel like I haven't talked too much.
4 or 5 things that have to go absolutely right. The basics, location, we have. Market demand, we have. And developer with a great track record, we have. Interest rates will always have an impact. Certainly, changes in the economy are going to have an impact. Finding the right retail mix, something that people really want, because again, it's not who we put in there, but it's who does the populace desire to go visit. So those are going to be key. I think I'm going to keep coming back to the economy, which interest rates and population in general, construction costs are a part of that too. So there's a lot of the risk involved. That's what a lot of that risk is, right? Interest rates, construction costs, general demand. I mean, we started thinking about this 7 years ago, and so we're just now finally getting to that phase where we're finally really make it happen. And we obviously didn't always pay attention to seeing a lot happen in the last 7 years or so. Hopefully we don't have another pandemic, right? But a lot can happen over the next few years. But right now it actually looks really good, really positive.
Yeah, and I mean that's also true, that it's the economics behind this whole thing, and those all have to line up for this to happen. And obviously we've all done our homework. We believe in this enough to stand in front of you tonight and talk about it. At the end of the day, there is one more thing though, and it's the place, right? We've got to design it right. We've got to design it in a way that makes people want to actually be there. And I have a whole heck of a lot of faith in this team to be able to do that, but that's the one other thing that I would add to that list that I think is just super important.
Other questions? Questions? Anybody? How's your chance? All right, like Russ said, look, there will be other chances, but it's nice to get the whole team together here in something of a cozy environment, no pressure. Anything you want to ask, you didn't want to ask tonight, you want to send us an email. Do we have it's on there? Okay, so there's contact information on the flyer right there. All right, so please grab one on your way out. If you think of a question later, I know that always happens to me. I walk out and that's when I think of the question. Please make sure you sign in. Real important. The city really likes that. Like to know who came. Make sure there's a good representation of the neighborhood here. And with that said, thanks guys. Good job.